Palpatine feared yellow lightsaber Jedi not because of their combat ability or the color of their blades, but because of what those blades represented. The Jedi most commonly associated with yellow survived Order 66 at higher rates than almost any other group in the Order. They did it by staying anonymous, avoiding temples, and disappearing into urban environments where no one would think to look. That survival rate was not an accident. It was the result of a philosophy that made them uniquely dangerous to a Sith Lord running a 1,000-year conspiracy from inside the Senate. The roots of that advantage go back to the earliest days of the Order. For most of Jedi history, members followed one of three paths. In legend sources like the Jedi Path and the Knights of the Old Republic RPG guides, these were formally defined. Guardians carried blue blades and focused on combat. Consulars carried green and devoted themselves to the Force, diplomacy, and philosophy, while Sentinels carried yellow and rejected the idea of choosing one or the other. A Jedi instructor named Morit Shigali, writing in the Jedi Path, argued that the Jedi had become cut off from the workings of the galaxy, and that knowing too much about combat or the Force was a liability if it meant knowing nothing about intelligence gathering, computer slicing, surveillance, or espionage. Sentinels combined Force training with practical skills like security, demolitions, investigation, and medicine. Among the most elite sub-traditions were the Jedi Shadows, operatives under the Council of First Knowledge who tracked Sith artifacts and operated alone with a level of secrecy unusual for Jedi. They were the Order's dedicated Sith Hunters, the most dangerous specialty to a hidden Sith Lord. By Palpatine's era, that tradition had largely gone dormant. The Order had grown so confident the Sith were extinct that it stopped training the people whose entire job was to prove otherwise. In practice, the difference between the three paths was simple. A Guardian would bash down a locked door, a Consular would knock, and a Sentinel would find a way to pick the lock. According to the Legend Saga Edition RPG by Wizards of the Coast, Sentinels had become nearly extinct in the Jedi Order by the time Palpatine rose to Supreme Chancellor. The formal three-path class system remains a Legends framework, but canon has steadily imported its core ideas. The real problem for Palpatine was not that these Jedi existed, it was that they operated on the exact same battlefield he did. The Sith Grand Plan was not primarily a military strategy. It was a political, financial, and intelligence operation that eventually weaponized galactic war itself. In the Legends novel Darth Plagueis, the strategy traced back to Darth Bane, who 1,000 years earlier had established the Rule of Two and the principle that the Sith would hide within the Republic rather than attack it openly. By the time of Darth Tenebrous, Plagueis' own master, the Sith described themselves as an unseen opposition that had traded armor for cloaks. Tenebrous and the generations before him had built vast networks of informants that the Senate and the Jedi knew nothing about, spanning mining surveys, weapons manufacturers, and political operatives. These were not criminals hiding in the underworld, but legitimate business relationships, political donations, and corporate partnerships operating in plain sight. Their tools were not lightsabers, but secrecy, information control, bureaucracy, infiltration, and influence. Plagueis used a financial front called Damask Holdings to manipulate elections, fund separatist movements, and position allies inside the Republic Senate. Damask Holdings operated across dozens of systems, financing everything from trade disputes to political campaigns, all while presenting itself as a legitimate investment firm. The young Palpatine, under Plagueis' guidance, brought the same intensity to political manipulation that his master brought to midichlorian experimentation. In the Legends companion book, Book of Sith, the senator described the foundation of his system as fusing modern politics with Sith philosophy, noting that real power brokers operate from the shadows and that credits can purchase anything, including access and silence. The Legends novel Cloak of Deception, also by James Luceno, captures how far the Republic had already decayed. Its own chancellor could barely govern, with dozens of overlapping committees required for even basic administrative decisions, while the Trade Federation prospered by exploiting exactly this kind of dysfunction. Meanwhile, the Jedi Council waited for the Force to reveal threats, dispatched Guardians to fight wars, and sent consulars to negotiate treaties. The Jedi were looking for a dark side presence, while the Sith were running a lobbying campaign. Then, In the final days of the Clone Wars, it almost happened. The Jedi nearly found Sidious, not through the Force, but through detective work. In the Legends novel Labyrinth of Evil, also by Luceno, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker traced by a separatist holotransceiver from a Mechno chair through its Zycharian manufacturer to a Bith designer, and then to a Twilight courier operating in the Works, an abandoned industrial district on Coruscant. At the same time, Mace Windu and Shaak Ti followed separate forensic evidence to the base of 500 Republica, the luxury tower where the Chancellor lived. A Republic intelligence agent named Captain Dine, working alongside the Jedi, became the first person in the Republic to realize that Darth Sidious and Supreme Chancellor Palpatine were the same individual. They reached that conclusion by tracing supply chains, interviewing contacts, and following physical evidence. The Jedi got within one building of Sidious, and they did it without the Force. But the Order had no Sentinel networks left. The investigation was improvised, running on borrowed Republic intelligence assets rather than any standing Jedi intelligence division. If the Order had maintained the Sentinel and Shadow networks that once served exactly this function, the Sith Grand Plan might never have reached its final stage. Instead, by the time the Jedi tried intelligence work, they were learning on the job in the middle of a war they were already losing. They had no dedicated analysts tracking Sith financial patterns, no long-term intelligence database, and no network of informants embedded in the Senate or the corporate sector. The irony runs deeper than missed opportunities. In Legends, the Jedi Watchmen tradition assigned experienced Jedi to specific planets or sectors for years, sometimes decades. Watchmen worked alongside planetary or sector governments and were often the highest-ranking Jedi authority in their star system. They built deep personal relationships with local populations, law enforcement, and government officials over long periods of time. A Watchman might mediate local disputes, advise a planetary government on security concerns, or monitor trade routes for criminal activity, all while maintaining the kind of regular contact with ordinary citizens that most temple-based Jedi never experience. Ki-Adi-Mundi, before joining the Council, served as Watchman of his home world Syria, where he developed a network of contacts including an Ordolan informant named Yidi. When the Watchman of Kadenth, a Jedi named Bodis Kervatan, was killed in a pro-separatist uprising, the planet's government withdrew its support for the Republic entirely. One embedded Jedi had anchored an entire world's loyalty. Yoda himself demonstrated the survival value of those bonds. During Order 66, the Grand Master sensed the destruction of the Jedi through the Force before the clones could kill him, but his long-standing relationship with the Wookiees proved essential to his escape from Kashyyyk. Palpatine's empire was built to make that kind of relationship impossible. The Tarkin Doctrine, introduced in A New Hope and expanded in the canon novel Tarkin, replaced distributed local authority with regional governors backed by military force. In the film, Tarkin announces that fear of the battle station will keep local systems in line. In the novel, he framed over-sector governance as a way to improve quality of life across the galaxy, but the stated ideal masked the reality. Centralized military control replacing the local trust that had defined Republic governance for centuries. Worlds that had maintained their own security relationships with Jedi Watchmen now answered to military governors who had never set foot on their soil. The canon reference book, The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, describes how the Empire used escalating normality on core worlds, slowly increasing its control so the changes were barely noticed. On the Outer Rim, the approach was blunter. On worlds like Lothal, the Empire shut down local industries and replaced them with Imperial mining operations, forcing the population into dependency on the state. On planets like Priscilla, governments eliminated entire economic sectors so that the only remaining work was in strategically important mines. Imperial propaganda simultaneously recast the Jedi as traitors who had attempted to overthrow the Republic, making it dangerous for ordinary citizens to even speak favorably about them. The Watchman model ran on trust, while the Empire ran on fear. However, even after destroying those networks, the Empire had a deeper problem. The Jedi Temple held something he could not simply burn. In canon, the Temple guards were anonymous, Jedi Knights who gave up their individual identities to protect the Temple's secrets, traditions, archives, and continuity. Their role ensured that records of Force techniques, histories of Sith conflicts, and the institutional knowledge of a 1,000-year relationship with the Republic remained secure. According to the StarWars.com databank, they gave up their names and disappeared inside formal robes and identity-concealing masks as part of a lifelong commitment. They carried distinctive double-bladed lightsaber pikes that produce yellow blades. Behind-the-scenes sources confirmed the pikes were originally designed to be green and were changed to yellow specifically to reflect the Sentinel connection. The Grand Inquisitor's origin shows exactly how far Palpatine was willing to go. According to canon sources, including Rebels, the Darth Vader comics, and the Ultimate Star Wars New Edition reference book, the Grand Inquisitor was a Pau'an Jedi Knight who had served as a temple guard. He escorted Barriss Offee during her trial, watching a Jedi Padawan publicly accuse the Order of losing its way and becoming soldiers in a war rather than keepers of peace. Offee argued that the Jedi had fallen from their ideals and that the Order itself had become the very thing it claimed to fight. The experience left him conflicted about the Order's direction, and he was not the only Jedi shaken by Offee's words. His deeper grievance went further back. Jocasta Nu, the Jedi Chief Librarian, had denied him access to restricted sections of the archives because of his low rank. Sidious exploited that frustration directly, seducing the former guard with the promise of full archive access. According to creator commentary from Rebels producer Henry Gilroy, speaking at DragonCon in 2018, the future Grand Inquisitor may have played a direct role in allowing Vader and the 501st Legion into the temple by turning on the other guards. If accurate, the guards held off the clones for hours before being betrayed from within. The Sith Lord did not simply kill the Guardians of Jedi memory, he turned one of them into a weapon and used him to open the door. After the fall of the temple, Luke Skywalker unknowingly continued this thread. In the canon comic series Star Wars, Luke lost Anakin's blue lightsaber on Bespin and later recovered a damaged Temple Guard pike at an abandoned High Republic outpost on a world called Tempest. He repaired it into a single yellow blade and carried it for a significant stretch of his journey. In issue 29, he gave it up entirely and completed a rescue using resourcefulness instead of the Force. The story can be read as emphasizing adaptability and practical skill over inherited power, qualities closely associated with the Sentinel tradition. What happened next proves just how dangerous the Emperor considered those survivors. The survival data comes with a critical follow-up. The Inquisitors of the Empire ruthlessly hunted every Sentinel who escaped the Purge. If Sentinels survived at higher rates, as the legend sources indicate, they would have represented a particularly dangerous group among those survivors. A surviving Guardian could fight back, but fighting alone does not rebuild an institution. A surviving Consular could preserve teachings and philosophy, but philosophy alone cannot recruit, organize, or establish supply lines. A surviving Sentinel could build contact networks, gather intelligence, recruit Force-sensitive individuals, and organize resistance without alerting the Imperial Security Bureau. Legend sources describe Sentinel sub-traditions that included recruiters who tracked Force-sensitive children through Republic Med Center data and a crystal database called the Kyber Memory Crystal, exactly the kind of pipeline needed to restart an order from nothing. Those are not warrior skills or scholar skills, they are operative skills. In canon, Asajj Ventress reinforces this pattern. In the novel Dark Disciple by Christie Golden, she acquired a yellow lightsaber on the black market after losing her red sabers. Her adoption of a yellow blade can be read as reflecting how far she had moved from her former Sith identity. By the time she reappeared carrying it in The Bad Batch Season 3, she was operating as an independent Force user, surviving through adaptability, contacts, and practical skill rather than raw dark side power. In Legends, the pattern held as well. When Luke Skywalker began rebuilding the Order, he identified figures like Cam Solazar and Kyle Katarn as prime examples of what the Sentinel function meant for the new generation. Solazar, a former Imperial agent who served the dark side under the Reborn Emperor before Luke redeemed him, brought field intelligence skills directly into Luke's academy. Katarn operated as a mercenary and rebel agent for years before formally joining the Order, combining combat ability with the kind of field intelligence work that defined the Sentinel tradition. Neither fit neatly into the Guardian or Consular mold. The Sith understood this weakness better than anyone. In Darth Plagueis, the Muun Sith Lord told his apprentice that the Jedi had confused the Republic's business with the business of the Force, and had made themselves poorly suited for the galaxy the Sith spent a millennium reshaping. Sidious agreed, noting that the Jedi would have to be brought down from within, lured into a trap of their own making. The Grand Plan exploited overconfidence in institutions, over-reliance on prophecy, and dependence on the Republic. Those were the exact blind spots Sentinel-style Jedi were trained to resist, because they never assumed the Force would solve every problem. Kemshal's The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire records that one of the Empire's greatest achievements was erasing the Jedi from public memory entirely. Despite 1,000 years of service to the Republic, even memory was a threat to the Sith. Many of the functions that kept the Order alive, guarding knowledge, investigating threats, building local networks, and anchoring community resistance, became strongly associated with yellow-bladed traditions, particularly Sentinels and Temple Guards. These were the Jedi the Grand Plan was least equipped to handle, not because they were more powerful in the Force, but because they picked locks instead of smashing doors, and awareness was the one thing the Sith Grand Plan could never afford its enemies to have. The purge that followed reshaped the galaxy in ways that went far beyond dead Jedi, but one of the survivors lived the Sentinel model exactly. He disappeared into a local community, stayed anonymous, and watched over a Force-sensitive child for nearly 2 decades. What Obi-Wan actually did during those years on Tatooine is that survival strategy in action.